short time in the role as registrar. Feels like I jumped into a very big ocean and it just keeps on going. But it's such an essential ocean that I think you all should start swimming in. So just so you know who a registrar is, and the registrar's office of the Ministry Standards Commission, that's me. There's only me, with Vanda as my loyal, steady Watson when I need to do investigations, and she sits up in Auckland. So, rough idea, I'm obviously I'm a barrister, and I also work in mental health as what's called an ombudsman or a district inspector for mental health. So I have the two roles, and over the last 4 months I've realised they're parallel universes sometimes, because we're looking, my whole life is looking at complaints that can come in where people are saying or alleging that there has been a deviation of a standard that's nominated in the canons. Canon's been around for ages. Ministry of Standards Commission is basically wanting to create a level playing field so that complaints can be dealt with in a consistent manner according to a process that is laid down. So there isn't a decision by one parish to do this with a complaint and the same complaints made over here and there is a different outcome. The idea is that we are all, you are all held to the same standards, and that there's a process if those standards are breached. Does that make sense? I don't want to bore you. It's no fun to be bored when there's so much there. The Canon 1, if you like, talks about the standards of behaviour that is accepted by members of this church. And I have to also say that I am independent. I am not a member of this church. And if you want to sum up all of those standards that are imposed, it's of exemplary behaviour. That's a very, very high standard. A lot of people cannot reach that standard for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it is ignorance. Sometimes it is deliberate. But when the complaints are made to someone like me as registrar, I am looking to see what breaches of that exemplary behaviour have occurred. And then I've got this whole series of process that I'll go through. But before I get into that process, I want to say, just talking to people, one of the reasons I enjoy this role, even though it's been a bit rocky, is the fact that I want to be available before the breach occurs. I want to be able to assist if someone says, I don't know what to do about this. Do I take it along the official route and go down this process? Or do I just ask the person for a cup of tea? What do I do? And some of those questions are really valid questions, and if I can help, I'd rather nip it in the bud than have to go through this very formal process which creates stress on both the person who is complaining and the person who is complained about, because it's a relatively long process. So I really am saying to people, you've got a problem, you've got a parishioner who comes in and is obviously struggling with, we were talking earlier about domestic abuse. Don't sweep it under the carpet. Think, how do I support both the person who is the abuser and the complainant and the person who is being abused? Both of them have got a problem, haven't they? It's very easy to say to you, oh, just don't do it again. Don't do it again. That doesn't work. So you've got to be able to protect both of them and be sensitive to both their needs. And certainly they're going to be different needs. The bishop is one of your wonderful roles. Quite often is the person who I will make recommendations to, either officially or not officially. So I had a bishop in a completely different area say, what do I do about a dinner that we all were having together? And one of the members, who was a licensed priest, was a little bit loose-lipped and a little bit foul-mouthed because of a little bit too much liquor. Does that sound familiar to anyone? You would never do that, would you? What do? Do I make it official? Everyone was upset. What do you think? I could take him down. I mean, that wasn't exemplary behaviour, was it? Lost the plot. Then we had a long yarn. Got the parties together who were offended and talked to them with the person who'd lost the plot. Were they happy with that? Yeah, in the long run, yes. But they wanted to hear it from that person, not from the bishop, not from anyone else, not from a letter. Dear blah, I'm sorry I lost the plot. They wanted to hear it. So that's the type of catching I want, because that'll stop a lot of angst as we go on. One of the things we've got, which of course I don't know off the top of my head, I only ring it every day on the phone, is that we've started an 0800 number for the registrar, which we haven't had that direct phone number before. So within, my little phone rings me at 5 o'clock every afternoon and tells me to check the church phone. And I will check it, and then I will get back to anyone who leaves a message. So there's that type of contact we've started. And it's been a busy phone. You'd be surprised. Okay, so what do we do about these standards? Exemplary, nominated in Canon 1 in particular. Well, it comes to me and I read it, and I've got a lot of decisions to make. I look at it and think, is there any substance to this complaint? Stopping, moving over here, forgot to say, please, it's really important to fill in the complaint form because that's the basis of my actions. So I look at it and think, is there a substance to this? Is it dealing with something like liturgy or something that I don't have any control over? I deal with breaches of behaviour. If there's no substance, I can dismiss it. And I don't just do it by reading the complaint form and thinking, oh, this is very wussy. Quite often I will ring the complainant, and sometimes that in itself is exactly what's necessary. I will give them my ear to make the complaint, even though it's not a complaint. And quite often I'll say to them, do you feel better? Is there anything else I can do? Because I really don't think this comes within Title D. And we take it from there. So I can dismiss it, but I usually do some work behind that dismissal so people feel as if they haven't wasted their time. Or I can think, whoa, there's something here. I need further evidence to support whatever allegation there is. And certainly And unfortunately, I have to say, some of my time in the last 4 months has been taken up with allegations of sexual abuse by people in ministerial positions. So I have to be a bit sensitive about this for 2 reasons. I mean, one, they're allegations only. If they haven't gone to the police, I have to make sure that there's some substance to this. If they're straightforward and there's enough evidence, the police should be involved straight away. If it's about children, Oranga Tamariki should be involved straight away. But if it's abuse, and quite often it can be historical, because we can accept any now, it means I have to do a bit of digging, if you like. That's where I'll ring up my trustee Abe Vander and say, who is this person? How long have they been a priest? When were they made a priest? Give me some background. Then quite often I will have a conversation with the complainant, and I will have a conversation with the person who is accused, and then I will start an official ball rolling if I feel as if I have enough evidence, and I will contact them and I say, there's been a complaint, what do you say? Give me your submissions in 14 days. Or you can go to a lawyer. Making sense? This is the step-by-step stuff. If I get through all that and I get enough evidence and I speak to people that I need to speak to, I then have a choice to say, okay, my finding as a registrar is it's unsatisfactory conduct or it's misconduct. They're the 2 majors. So you've got dismissal, you've got unsatisfactory conduct, you've got misconduct. So it's unsatisfactory conduct. There's no intent there. Something's happened. There isn't a malicious intent. There is a lesser degree of culpability, or that's a big word, isn't it? There's a lesser degree of behaviour than misconduct. So then, if I think it's unsatisfactory and something should be done, I then write a report to the bishop. My final report. And in it I can make some recommendations. Now, a process of reconciliation could be one. That they themselves can hold a full investigation, particularly if it involves money. They can suggest training or counselling to the person in their conversation. Me, I go straight to the heart of it and say, if this is unsatisfactory conduct and I believe there's going to be some benefit, I add a mediator and a list of mediators in the area that would assist the bishop in that conversation. Because quite often, going back, sitting in the same room, not about sexual abuse, sitting in the same room about a variety of complaints with the person takes the wind out of their sails, makes them look at them quite humanly, and with the skills of a mediator, they can come to some resolution. So that's the lower end, if you like. Still pretty heavy. They still get some contact from the bishop saying, I've heard that you've got unsatisfactory behaviour. Feels like you're at school, doesn't it? You know, headmaster, unsatisfactory behaviour. Okay. The other thing is the more important one, I suppose. The one that I dread to do, but I will do, is misconduct. That's where there's evidence. That's where there's evidence that shows intentional or significant and ongoing breach of the exemplary behaviour. So The misconduct means you have failed to meet ministry standards. And a recent one, of course, that then goes to the bishop, and I ask the bishop to form a tribunal, and that's heavy because they're told to try and get legal counsel, and you would need it at a tribunal. I also have to ask the bishop to make sure that they have pastoral support, both the complainant and the person going to the tribunal or the respondent. Both need support. Remembering, even though this may be within the auspice of the church, you're not guilty, you're presumed innocent. So you've got to make sure there's a fair bit of counselling on either side. There's privacy issues there too. There's a lot of people who don't want other people to know that they're being taken to a tribunal for misconduct. So there has to be privacy issues of those people unless they choose to avoid it. A tribunal, which has 3 members, can provide as a penalty if they find that that breach or breaches have been proven, can admonish, and that goes on file. They can suspend for a set time, deprivation for a set time, and only allow back into a licensed position once they reach several or attain several standards and proof of those standards, and deposition, which is, as you know, permanent. So the tribunal is pretty big. So you go to the tribunal on misconduct, that's pretty major stuff. So the tribunals that are going on now, there's only been 3 or 4. Most of them have been about sexual abuse. And again, I emphasise there is no time limit on a complaint about sexual abuse. None of them. Can have happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And we have to investigate. And that's the one thing that the Anglican Church is really good at. It keeps its records. I don't know if they go back to Christ's time apart from the Bible, but we're getting close. Getting really close. So that's the job. That's the routine that I go through. I have just recently spoken to the Ministry Standards Commission and said, I want an appraisal of this role. I want to see how it's working, if people feel as if they're coming, and that it's working for them. But I suppose primarily what I would like to say to you all is, if you've got a problem and you're not sure what to do with it, and you don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction and run and write out one of the lengthy complaint forms, you contact me. Does that make sense? And then we can have a yarn, and I can think about a way to avoid, in some ways, pinpointing someone as being wrong. Sometimes you can just talk it through and no one's wrong, just a different point of view. So I'm happy to have questions, or I could go on for hours, and that would be boring, let me tell you, because I'm a lawyer and I know how to bore.
I understand any person can make a complaint. Now, that might apply in a situation where the person complaining doesn't have any significant relation to the offence that is deemed to have happened. Now, firstly, is it true any person can make a complaint in that situation?
Yes.
So if that is true, and if I was making a complaint, would I have to advise the person who might be described or perceived to be the victim?
Okay, so we've got a three-way here. We've got someone out who's an abuser, we've got someone who's a victim, and you're a witness going, yeah.
Yes.
Right. My advice always would be to talk to the victim and see if they're okay about you making a complaint. Because out of context, it might be something else. But I would always have that and assist them if they say, what a good idea, assist them to make the complaint with you.
So, if I made a complaint without advising the victim, could I be guilty of abuse?
Bishop, sorry, can I just ask a question relating to that? Could you clarify that's not the case if you know or suspect of child abuse?
Oh, it's not the case at all.
Sorry, just wanted to
It
make
goes
that
straight,
point
yeah,
because
no,
It goes
very
to
well.
authorities need to be
Yeah,
involved in
no.
that.
No, we're not talking sexual abuse here. Sexual abuse, all holds are off,
All
okay?
forms of child abuse.
Yeah, to all child abuse,
Physical,
you go, well, one, you go to the police, you go, make any complaint you can to me, but you go to the police, you go to Oranga Tamariki, you do not stop and you don't get 200. And you don't get prayed over, all right? To be quite honest, no, I don't think you would, but what you would get from me is, unless I can talk to the victim, I can't do a damn thing. So what is it that's going to make you feel better? Maybe it's just the fact that you contacted me. And I can sometimes go around the back door and just check on that victim. I mean, when I'm working in mental health, and I often get these type of comments, you know, I ring up the appropriate person and say, go and do a welfare check on that person as they were standing naked on the corner of whatever street. I think they might be a bit off. Not so direct here, but I certainly would be ringing Andrew or someone and saying, do a welfare check, check that that person's okay.
Thank you.
Just a supplementary to that, when the person says, I don't want you to go to the police, I don't want you to take this further, it's a very difficult one. And I think the police are sometimes hamstrung with people withdrawing charges later.
I think it's really hard. I mean, if it's child abuse, you have no choice, right? Children involved, you have no choice, you go straight. It is difficult. All you can do is say, I suspect, but that's when you would ring anyone that you know that works in the area of sexual abuse in your area. You would also have a yarn with me, and I would have a crack at talking to that person and ensuring that they're safe. When a person says, I don't want you to go to the police, quite often it's not fear of what the police will do, it's fear that the abuser, whoever it is, will take it out on them or their family. You've got to understand this. Or it's fear that she or he might have to walk away from a relationship that falsely they believe is their only relationship in the world. So you have to handle it really carefully, because the motivation to say no, don't go to the police, is not straightforward. It involves guilt, it involves fear. It is really, really difficult for them. So there are many ways to go around a corner, right? But if you see someone who comes in who has obvious physical signs of being abused, or obviously having been sexually abused, you do not hesitate but ring the police anyway. It's the more difficult ones that come in and don't want to tell you and don't want to do it and don't want to leave. Don't be gay oaks and do not bury them in the backyard, for those who remember that.
Anyone else got a question? Thank you, Barbara.
Wendy, you've got an incredibly tough job. How do you look after yourself, or do you have, debriefing or supervision, or?
because of mental health, I had a supervisor already, so I've upped the ante. I have more than one session. So yes, I do supervision. I'm also a pottery berg person and do some bowls and stuff. So I really carve out some time for me. I think it's really important because all I do is get complaints either from man people or from the church. And as I say, it's mutually. I have learnt that over the years. That's why I've got grey hair, is that all of you in stressful situations, you need to carve out time for you. It's very important.
Thanks, Barbara. Any further questions? Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Wendy, first of all. And I just was wondering, at a parish level, we have, I'm not sure what the correct name is, but kind of like a safeguarding officer people can go to and chat. And I'm just wondering, how does that fit into what you've described in terms of, I get the sense you're inviting us, please contact you first.
Well, if that person is having a chat and not sure what they're doing, or wants to talk to someone, then you ring me. But you have to be confident that you've got that type of process nice for those type of complaints or issues that come. And if they're minor issues and they can be dealt with at this local level, that's fine. But I think that everyone should be aware that if they're not sure what to do, you ring me and then I'll sit there and think, I don't know what to do. But I'll think about it and I'll try and find a way through for it. Or I'll go and talk to someone like a supervisor and say, okay, give us a clue. So you've got more people thinking about the same problem.
Damon.
Wendy, a couple of questions. One is that what we're talking about is the behaviour not only of ordained clergy, but anyone who holds office in an Anglican Church.
Absolutely.
And the second thing, I'm just looking here at Title D, it covers an enormous range, and most of us would fail in some aspect of it.
Yes, welcome to the human race.
So you must have a very, very busy job.
I think that most of us, you read those canons. I wouldn't get far through them without breaching them, I'm pretty sure. But it's common sense too. Are you offending anyone? Are you posing a risk to anyone else? Or are you trying to live the best way you can within the precepts that are set down and those principles? It's when there's a skive off to the right or the left that is so apparent that it hurts somebody. That's when I see that there's a breach. And we all have arguments. I wanted to wear my mental health shirt today, I have to say, because I've had an enormous amount of complaints that I've gone, it's the basic human nature, and is I want to blame someone when something doesn't go my way. It's their fault because they didn't run the last sermon the way I wanted to do. They didn't sing the hymns I wanted, and they didn't do that. I get a lot of those. And I wanted to wear my t-shirt today that says, be kind. Just remember, this is a blame culture we live in, and it's unconsciously blame. Most of it is unconscious. So a lot of the complaints, I am pleased to say that after I look at them, I can think, no, you weren't being kind. It was just one of those things. But it's a very high standard. I won't apologise for that. I think that it is a high standard if you're walking, and I am not of your church, but it is a high standard for a very good reason, because you had a role model that was a high standard, so you better get your act together and follow that. Have I confused everyone?
Any further questions for Andrea?
You've said that you get quite a range of complaints, from the very serious to the ones where you just think, oh, for goodness sake.
That's not exactly what I say, but I just...
I was just giving the vibe of what you said.
Just about.
At what stage for across the spectrum of complaints, at what stage does the person being complained about be given a copy of the complaint? Is it only for the very serious ones, or
no? If they're apart from those that I'll dismiss because there's no merit in them. If it looks like the other person knows about it anyway, like I'm going to tell on you, I'm going to go to the Ministry Standards Commission, then I will contact the other side. Because they know already and they're waiting for it, and that's nothing worse than waiting for a bomb to hit. Right? So then I'll contact them. But if it's obvious that it's just this general, I want to blame everyone, and I've just stopped. I'm not blaming God, but I've blamed everyone below. Then I'll talk to them. Right? But if it's anything that the other person knows or has evidence, they will know from me as soon as I've formed the view that I need to keep going on this. They will know within 10 days of me receiving that complaint.
and they'll hear from you?
They'll hear it from me, and I'll be saying, this is the complaint, and I'll have taken out all the relevant details of names, even though 90% of them know the other person anyway. And then I'll say, come back to me, what do you think? And then, quite honestly, it's the way I work, they'll come back saying, this is what happened, this is my view, and then I look at their view. And quite often I will then ring them both and say, let's have a further chat about this, let me just tease out some more of this. And if it's as simple as that, I will then form an opinion, and my final report will go to the bishop, and it will have a recommendation. Okay, unsatisfactory, whatever. And on one of the dismissal ones, I actually wrote to the bishop and said, this is a dismissed complaint. However, this person is obviously very distressed and needs half an hour of your time over a cup of tea to let this person be able to come back into the church and worship. No complaint, but a little bit of time may well take away a lot of hurt. So that's how I deal with it. Hopefully that answered your question.